and welcome back to the study series of jurisprudence interpretation in general laws. So in this video, I'm going to be continuing with the primary sources of Indian law, and in the previous video that I had put up, I had completed statutes and legislation. So in this video, I'm going to be starting with judicial decisions or judicial precedents. But first, before we go on to what a precedent is, let me first explain the structure of the judiciary to you. So the judiciary is actually divided into a three-part level. At the topmost level, you have the Supreme Court. Now this Supreme Court is also known as the apex court. That means it is the highest court in the entire country. Then underneath the Supreme Court, we have respective high courts for each state. So while the Supreme Court, there's only one Supreme Court in the entire country, there can be multiple high courts throughout the country. Like I said, for every state. Okay. This high court will come under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. So imagine your Supreme Court is like the father. Everyone has to listen to him. The high court is underneath the Supreme Court. Let's assume the high court is the son. The son has to listen to everything that the Supreme Court is saying. Now under the high court, you have something known as subordinate courts. The subordinate courts can be like the younger brother. The younger brother has to listen to everything his elder brother says. Elder brother is the High Court and the father is the Supreme Court. Now this elder brother has the younger brother has two personalities. That is the civil court and the criminal court. So this is how your entire judiciary structure is structured in our country. So if the Supreme Court says something, then the High Court has to follow it. But does it mean even the subordinate courts has to follow it? The answer is yes. Both of them have to follow it. If the Supreme Court gives a decision, the High Court and the subordinate courts have to follow. But what if when the High Court gives a decision, then the Supreme Court does not have to follow it, but only the subordinate courts have to follow it? And similarly, what if the subordinate courts give some kind of a decision? If the subordinate courts are giving a decision, then the High Court and the Supreme Court do not have to follow it. So what do you understand from all of this? It simply means that when the Supreme Court gives any kind of a decision, then all the courts beneath it has to follow. Similarly, the High Court, whenever it gives any decision, the subordinate courts have to follow it. So I can say that the power is moving downwards. Correct? Now, there is a concept known as precedent. What is a precedent? A precedent is nothing other than the judgment issued by a higher court. So remember I said, when the Supreme Court gives a judgment, then all the lower courts will have to follow that judgment. Now I'll repeat that and say it in different words. When the Supreme Court gives the judgment, then the lower courts have to follow it as a precedent. So I can say that a precedent is some kind of a guiding conduct for the future. It is helping these lower courts to follow a certain decision of the Supreme Court. Now similarly, when the High Court gives a decision, then the lower courts have to follow the decision of the High Court as a precedent. This is what you mean by a precedent. Now, how do these precedents work? There is a certain principle known as the doctrine of stare decisis. It means do not disturb things which are already settled. So what do you mean by this doctrine of stare decisis? It is simply it's a doctrine which helps to bring about some kind of uniformity in law. Now, how is this in any way related to precedents? It's very simple. Remember I said precedents are anything which is a judgment which is given by the higher court. Now, precedents follow this doctrine of stare decisis. Okay. Now, let me give you an example. What if the Madras High Court had given one particular decision? Now, the Madras High Court gave this decision, but then the Gujarat High Court, on that exact same position in law, gives a different High Court. So I can say that the Gujarat High Court is going in one direction, whereas the Madras High Court is going in another direction. Now, understandable, when the Madras High Court gives a decision, then the people in the state of Tamil Nadu has to follow the decision given by the Madras High Court. The decision given by the Gujarat High Court will be followed by the people in the Gujarat High Court. It's as simple as that. But what if the Supreme Court gives a decision and the Madras High Court does not follow that decision? Then what will happen over here? Then it will bring about some kind of chaos. Nobody will know what is the proper position in law to follow. Nobody will know what to listen to, and it will become complete confusion. So that's why this doctrine of stare decisis is implemented. So this doctrine of stare decisis is simply saying that follow the higher court's decision as a precedent, as the law. And this is what we would call the judge-made law. So when a Supreme Court gives a decision, then it is considered to be the law of the land. And when it becomes the law of the land, then everybody has to follow that decision properly. But you see, it's not just as simple as that. Now let's assume that the Supreme Court, in short I've written SC, has given a judgment. Okay. Now let's recap to the three organs of state, that is the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. So for this purpose, let's not look at the executive. Let's look at the functions of the legislature and the judiciary. What does the legislature do? It makes the law. Correct? What does the judiciary do? The purpose of the judiciary is to interpret this law. So the judiciary cannot interpret anything that is not made by the legislature. The functions of the judiciary are directly linked to that law made by the legislature. Okay. So let us assume that the legislature passes some kind of notification or order, which is also considered to be law. Okay, so let's say an order, essentially just saying that vaccines are to be taxed at a 5% GST. Okay, now the question is, do all vaccines come under this, or is it only COVID vaccines? COVID vaccines or all vaccines? Now this becomes one huge confusion because there are vaccines for different things. But for the purpose of the coronavirus pandemic, for that reason only they're reducing the GST payable, because everybody needs to get vaccinated and paying such a large amount of tax is not possible. But when the legislature, when the government passed this order, they actually meant this COVID vaccine. But what they meant, how are we supposed to know about it? It's creating a kind of confusion, right? So this is where the judiciary comes in. What the judiciary will do is they will mull over this entire situation. They will hear both sides. They will take into consideration all the factors, the evidence, etc. And then they will give a clarification. What is that clarification? They be like, this 5% GST is only applicable to COVID vaccines and not anything else. So what is the Supreme Court doing over here? They are essentially saying that only COVID vaccines will be applicable for 5% GST. All other vaccines will be probably be taxed at 12% GST. So this is just an example that I'm giving you all to help you all understand how the Supreme Court will function. Now during this time, the judge, he gives a personal opinion. What is his personal opinion? The personal opinion is simply that he believes that the vaccines should not be taxed. This is his personal opinion. Now we all think that way. We all think, COVID vaccines, it should not be taxed. Correct? But then what is the function and purpose of the judiciary? The function and the purpose of the judiciary is to interpret the laws made by the legislature. And the legislature has passed this order. This order stating that vaccines are applicable for 5% GST. Now there is some confusion as to whether when they meant vaccines, did they mean all vaccines or did they only refer to COVID vaccines? Now the purpose of the judiciary is to merely give an interpretation or clarification on this. And they have done the same. They have clarified it saying that only COVID vaccines will be applicable for a 5% GST and all other vaccines will be chargeable to GST in a completely different way. But then during this time, he gives a personal opinion. The judge says that I personally believe that there should be no tax applicable for vaccines. Okay. Now, this personal opinion of the judge will not form precedent. because it is simply the personal opinion of the judge. Okay, so for this reason, what I'm going to make one small clarification. I'm going to make one small clarification between something known as ratio decidendi and obiter dicta. What do these two things mean? The ratio, first let's come to the obiter dicta. This obiter dicta is only known as the personal opinion of the judge. What did I say about the personal opinion of the judge? It does not form precedent. So, actually let's not use the word precedent over here. Let's use the word judgment over here for better clarification. Okay, so you have the judgment. Okay, a judgment can have something known as the ratio decidendi and it can have the obiter dicta. How do you distinguish between what is obiter dicta and what is ratio decidendi? It has to be found out within the wordings of the judgment itself, and there's no specific paragraph which will say this is the obiter dicta or this is the ratio decidendi. So what is the obiter dicta? It is the personal opinion of the judge, and this is not precedent. Okay, so what is precedent? This ratio decidendi is only the precedent. So what is this ratio decidendi? It's very simple. When the judge comes to a conclusion or a judgment after considering the facts of the case, then the evidence which is submitted to the court, the arguments presented by both parties, essentially we can say that after the judge takes into consideration all the necessary factors to bring about that judgment, and as a result of which he has passed a judgment. So in this case, what could be the judgment? The judgment is simply this, that COVID vaccines are applicable for 5% GST and not any other vaccine. It's just as simple as that. Now this particular decision only forms the Now this decision is what I would call the ratio of the case. As simple as that. So what is the ratio of the case? The ratio of the judgment is nothing other than the due process followed by the judge to come about this judgment. And this ratio decidendi only forms the precedent. The judgment may or may not include something known as an obiter dicta. An obiter dicta being the personal opinion of the judge, and this personal opinion will not be considered as the precedent. Okay guys, so I hope you all are clear with this. Now we'll move on to what is given in the textbook. So what is a judicial precedent? The term precedent means some set pattern guiding the future conduct. This is what I said, right? It is some judgment pronounced by the judge which will help all the lower courts, whether it's just the lower court or whether all these lower courts in the future, it will help them to decide what sort of law to implement over here. Now, in the judicial field, that means in terms of the judiciary, it means the guidance or authority of past decisions of the court for future cases. Be very careful with this understanding. They're saying over here that the Supreme Court may have given a decision in the year 1997. Now, even though it was given in the year 1997, the High Court of, let's say, Karnataka, even though it's the year 2020, regardless, the Karnataka High Court has to follow the decision of the Supreme Court given in the year 1997. The Karnataka High Court cannot just dismiss the judgment given by the Supreme Court in 1997 simply because it was given in the past. The whole purpose of a precedent is that it is some kind of a past decision that is a guiding pattern for future cases. So only such decisions which lay down some new rule or principle are known as judicial precedents. Now this is a very, very interesting concept. See over here, only such decisions which lay some new rule or principle is known as judicial precedents. What do you mean by this? We'll come to this in the later part of judicial precedents. When we finish studying about the types of judicial precedents, I will come back to this. Okay. Judicial precedents are an important source of law. They have enjoyed high authority at all times and in all countries. Now, let's come to the last part of the thing. The rule that a court decision becomes a precedent to be followed in similar cases is known as the doctrine of stare decisis. Now, this is the doctrine of stare decisis that I told you about. See, what is the doctrine of stare decisis? Doctrine of stare decisis simply states that whatever is already set in stone must not be changed. Okay. Why do we follow the doctrine of stare decisis? It's very simple. It's to bring about some kind of uniformity in law. Now, in your textbook, they have given something about the High Courts and the Supreme Court. So let me explain this to you in a separate document. What needs to be understood is that, remember I said that the Supreme Court is the highest court, and then you have the High Court, and then you have the subordinate courts. Correct? Now within the Supreme Court itself, there's a certain hierarchy. Okay? There's something known as a single judge bench. Okay? So I will just write single judge. Then there's something known as the division bench. So a bench simply means the number of judges in that thing. So division means 2 judges. Then there is a 3 judge bench. And then there's a 5 judge bench and a 7 judge bench. And the highest number of judges that sat together in a case was a 13 judge bench. In which case, in a case known as the Keshavananda Bharati versus the state of Kerala. This is a landmark case which you all will be studying about later in your constitutional law. In this particular case, a 13 judge bench sat over here. So remember how I told you, when the Supreme Court gives a judgment, then the High Court needs to follow it and the subordinate courts need to follow it. The same way, in the hierarchy within the Supreme Court itself, if a decision is given by a 7 judge bench, it needs to be followed by the 5 judge bench, 3 judge bench, division bench and a single judge bench. If a single judge bench gives a decision, so let's say they give a judgment, a single judge bench gives this judgment. This judgment can be overturned by the division bench. So you can see that the power is moving in this way. The higher the number of judges who are sitting in that particular court, the more power that decision has. So this is how your Supreme Courts. Now the same hierarchy is present within the High Courts itself. In the High Courts also, you can have like a higher number of judges who are sitting in the bench to hear the particular matter. The understanding is simply that when the judges go to the Supreme Court, then they are people of great learning. Okay, they've been in the field for such a long time, and when they are giving a decision on a particular point in law, it is considered to be that decision is considered to have come out with the amount of experience that judge also has. So more than a single judge bench, the decision of a 3 judge bench or a 5 judge bench or a 7 judge bench is so much more higher. So guys, this is what the entire hierarchy of the courts is, and as they have mentioned in your textbook. So in your textbook itself, they have referred to the exact same kind of hierarchy between the courts. As you can see over here, they have mentioned that the decisions of the higher court is binding on all the subordinate courts and tribunals within its jurisdiction. What are tribunals? It's just another type of court which we will be studying about in one of the later chapters. Now, we will come down to this one. In a high court, a single judge bench constitutes the smallest bench. A bench of 2 judges is known as the division bench. 3 or more judges constitute a full bench. This is what I forgot to mention, sorry. 3 judge or 5 judge or 7 judge or 9 judge bench is known as a full judge bench, and a decision of such a bench is binding on the smaller bench. So that means when a 7-judge bench gives a decision, it is binding on all the lower benches. Now, as you can see over here, there's another concept that needs to be explained. So far we've spoken about the Supreme Court and what is the hierarchy between the Supreme Courts. Okay, but let's come down to the High Courts. Alright, now remember I said there's a High Court in every state. So there's one High Court in Karnataka. So I will write it as Karnataka High Court. There's one High Court in Gujarat. So Gujarat High Court. There's one High Court in Delhi. So Delhi High Court, etc. Now, what if the Karnataka High Court gives a decision? Okay, let's assume that the question is whether the legal age of drinking, of consuming alcohol, is allowed to be, should be increased to 21 years of age. This is the question of law before the High Court. Now, the present law states that it is 18. So guys, this is just an example that I'm giving over here, okay? So the present law states that the legal age of drinking is 18. But then the Gujarat High Court comes out and they say, and what they try doing is, they try saying that the legal age of drinking should be increased to 21. And the Gujarat High Court gives its affirmation. So in Gujarat, the legal age of drinking is now 21 years of age. But around the same time, someone in Delhi goes and asks the exact same question. Someone goes to the Delhi High Court and petitions saying that the legal age of drinking should be increased to 21. Here, what does the Delhi High Court do is they reject that contention and they say that 18 years of age is only the legal age of drinking. Now, similarly, the Karnataka High Court has also said the exact same thing. Now, can you see that there's a conflicting decision over here? Karnataka High Court and Delhi High Court have decided on 18 years of age, while the Gujarat High Court has decided on 21 years of age. Is this allowed, or is this even possible? The answer is yes. You see, only when the Supreme Court gives a decision, that means if the Supreme Court has decided that the legal age of drinking should be 18, then the Gujarat High Court cannot go against this decision. The High Courts have to follow the decision of the Supreme Court and implement the 18 years of age rule. But then, what if the Supreme Court has not given this decision? Okay. Instead, the matter is only being contested before the High Courts of India. In that situation, what Gujarat High Court has done is correct. The Gujarat High Court can give a conflicting opinion as compared to the Delhi High Court and the Karnataka High Court. So here I can say that between the High Courts itself, the decisions given by these High Courts, I can say only has persuasive value. Okay, this is known as persuasive value. So what if the Gujarat High Court had decided on 21 years of age and the Delhi High Court had decided on 18 years of age? Now let's assume that the Karnataka High Court hadn't yet decided on the matter, alright? And they're deciding on the matter still to be decided before the Karnataka High Court. The decisions of the Gujarat High Court and the Delhi High Court, that is over here, it will have a persuasive nature on this Karnataka High Court. And as a result, the Karnataka High Court can implement either one of the two. It can go ahead and implement 18 years of age, or it can even implement 21 years of age. Whatever it comes out with, it is not wrong in doing so. So this is what I would call the persuasive nature of the High Courts in our country. So when you come back to the textbook itself, this is exactly what they've given over here. The decision of one High Court only has a persuasive value in a court which is within the jurisdiction of another High Court. Essentially, they're saying that High Courts only have persuasive value on each other. But if such decision is in conflict with any decision of the High Court within whose jurisdiction that court is situated, it has no value. And the decision of the High Court is not binding on the court. What do they simply mean by this? It's very simple. What if remember we discussed that the Delhi High Court had determined, Delhi High Court had determined that 18 years of age is the legal limit. So any kind of the subordinate courts has to implement this exact same rule as 18 years of age. But then the Gujarat High Court had done what? The Gujarat High Court had implemented 21 years age of the legal drinking. So any subordinate courts which is present within Gujarat itself has to follow the 21 years of age. A subordinate court in Gujarat cannot follow the decision of the Delhi High Court. It's as simple as that. In case any conflict between two decisions of co-equal benches, that means a two-judge bench and a two-judge bench both have given conflicting decisions, then the later decision is to be followed. As simple as that. Okay? So my friends, this is exactly how a High Court works, and even the Supreme Court. Now, if you have to look at the Supreme Court, you can say that. Now, if you have to look at the Supreme Court, they are referring to Article 141 over here. Now, remember at one point in time I mentioned the law of the land. This Article 141 of the Indian Constitution only specifies that any decision given by the Supreme Court is known as the law of the land under Article 141 of the Constitution. So, because of this, the Supreme Court, when it gives out a decision, it has to be followed by all the high courts as well as the subordinate courts. But then, a decision given by the Supreme Court, say in the year 1990, need not be followed by the Supreme Court itself in the year 2020. In 1990, the Supreme Court could have gone ahead and said that the legal age of drinking is 16 years of age. And it could have been followed by all the courts in the country for a period of, say, 30 years. But then in 2020, it can go ahead and change this entire thing by saying that now the legal age of drinking is now 21 years. The Supreme Court is essentially not bound by its own decisions. But the Supreme Court has observed that the earlier decisions of the court cannot be departed from unless there is an extraordinary or special reasons to do so. Why? Because the whole purpose of following a precedent as a law is to bring about some kind of uniformity in that law. If the Supreme Court itself goes ahead and starts changing the law by itself, then it will cause some kind of confusion within the judicial structure in our country. So unless there is an extraordinary or special reason for doing so, it must not be departed from. Another point is that if the earlier decision is found to be erroneous and is detrimental to the general welfare of the public, the Supreme Court can depart from the earlier decision. So let's say that in the year 1997, a decision was given by the Supreme Court. The minute the decision is given by the Supreme Court, it becomes the precedent. And it has to be followed by all the lower courts. But what if this decision was erroneous? Erroneous. Okay? In that situation, if the Supreme Court is hearing the matter again, say in the year 2002, then it can go ahead and disregard this precedent and it can give a new decision. And this decision will be considered as the precedent. This is how the judge-made law or precedents work in our country. Now, my friends, I'm going to explain to you the types of precedents. Precedents itself are I can say 5 types. Okay. Now, these are very, very easy. The first one is known as original precedent. As the name itself suggests, it simply means that when a judge is giving a new interpretation in law. Alright. Now, let's take, for example, the topic of Bitcoin. Okay, it's fairly new, right? The concept of Bitcoin. We don't have a law governing Bitcoin. We don't have past decisions. It is only a new concept that's come out very recently. So now the Supreme Court can come out with a decision regarding Bitcoin. Now, considering it's a new interpretation in law or a new type of interpretation, I can call it an original precedent. So it's the first time interpretation in that law is being made. The second type of precedent is known as declaratory precedent. What do you mean by declaratory precedent? The declaratory precedent is merely declaring the original precedent. So that means if the Supreme Court had given this decision on Bitcoin in the year 2019, okay, then if a similar matter regarding Bitcoin is being heard in the year 2021, then the 2021 judgment simply has to declare the original judgment given in the year 2019. So this is what I would call a declaratory precedent. It's merely declaring an already existing position in law, or it's simply declaring an original precedent. Now the third type of precedent is known as persuasive precedent. What do you mean by persuasive precedent? This is actually of two types. The first one is what I taught you about obiter dicta, and the second thing is between high courts. What do you mean by this? Now, remember I taught you what obiter dicta is, and obiter dicta is considered to be what? It's considered to be the personal opinion of the judge. Now, even though this is the personal opinion of the judge and it does not form part of the precedent, means it does not have to be compulsorily followed by all the lower courts, it merely has a persuasive value. Okay, so there was a case known as Vishaka versus the state of Rajasthan. In this case, it was actually a very interesting case because in this case, the judges had laid down some guidelines, okay, and these guidelines were considered to be the personal opinion of the judges. But then this guidelines was so comprehensive and so good that eventually it was taken up as a precedent and implemented in all future judgments. In fact, they even made a law out of these guidelines. Okay, so you can Google this Vishaka versus state of Rajasthan and find out what it's about. So a personal opinion of the judge is simply that it merely has a persuasive value on the other courts. So if the Supreme Court, like I said, with the example of the coronavirus vaccine, if the Supreme Court gave a personal opinion saying that vaccine should have no tax, then at a later point in time, another court can take up this personal opinion if they so wish and implement it in their decision. That is allowed, and that is what you call persuasive precedents. Now the second type of persuasive precedents I told you about was, remember, Karnataka High Court and Gujarat High Court. When a decision is given by the Gujarat High Court, it merely has a persuasive value on the Karnataka High Court. Okay, and this is what I would call as persuasive precedents. So what have we studied so far? That the first one is original precedent, the second one is declaratory precedent, the third one is persuasive precedents, which are actually of two types of situations. One is when the obiter dicta of the judgment of a higher court is being implemented as law in the future case or by the future court. Another type of persuasive precedents can exist between two high courts. One high court's judgment merely has a persuasive value on another high court's judgment. Now the fourth type of precedent is actually known as absolutely authoritative precedents. Now this is a very, very simple concept. Absolutely authoritative means what? It is compulsory. So when a precedent is given by the Supreme Court, okay, it is absolutely authoritative on the high courts. And if a decision is given by the High Court, then it's absolutely authoritative on the subordinate courts. Now, if a 3-judge bench has given a judgment, then it is absolutely authoritative on a 2-judge bench or a division bench. And if a division bench has given a decision, then it is absolutely authoritative on a 1-judge bench. So this is what you mean by absolutely authoritative precedents. The fifth type is known as conditionally authoritative precedents. This is also very simple. Remember, we had studied that if the decision of a higher court given in the past was erroneous or it wasn't the correct decision in law, then it need not be followed as a precedent. Okay, so let's assume that a decision given in the year 1997 by the Supreme Court, at the time that they gave the judgment, actually it was later on found out that the Supreme Court had not taken all the evidence into consideration, and as a result the decision given could not have been a proper one, correct? So in that situation, when the Supreme Court is hearing the same matter in the year 2002, they can completely disregard this decision given by the Supreme Court in 97 and give a new interpretation in law. So this is known as conditionally authoritative precedents. These conditionally authoritative precedents have to be followed only in certain situations. That is, if there is an erroneous interpretation of law, or if proper evidence was not taken, or the court believes that it is very important not to follow the same decision as a precedent to continue into the future. So friends, this is the types of precedents. As you can see over here, the types of precedents are given over here. In your textbook, they have given declaratory and original precedents together. Okay, see over here, declaratory and original precedents. So first we'll go into this. An original precedent is one which creates and applies a new rule of law. This is what I said. Original precedent means new interpretation in law. Whereas a declaratory precedent is one which is merely the application of an already existing rule in law. So that means the declaratory precedent is merely declaring an already settled position in law. Alright. The next one is persuasive precedents. Persuasive precedents is one which the judges is not obliged to follow, but they will take into consideration. So a persuasive precedent is not a legal source of law. Thus, in India, the decisions of one high court are merely persuasive on the other high courts. Then you have absolutely authoritative precedents. An authoritative precedent is one which judges must follow whether they approve or not. Okay? Whereas conditionally authoritative precedents is one which, though ordinarily binding on the court before which it was cited, is liable to be disregarded. Which is when will it be disregarded? If the decision is a wrong one, or if it is contrary to law and reason. That's all. So absolutely authoritative precedence is something that the judges must follow regardless of what they think otherwise. So generally, in absolutely authoritative precedence, every court in India is absolutely bound by the decision of the courts superior to it. Superior court is Supreme Court. So all the courts lower to it will have to follow it. If the High Court gives a decision, all the subordinate courts will have to follow it. Whereas conditionally authoritative precedents are only to be used in certain situations. That is, the lower court can disregard the decision of the previous court if it was a morally wrong one, or if it is contrary to law and reason. The next concept that they have mentioned over here is the doctrine of stare decisis. The doctrine of stare decisis is the principle on which the concept of a precedent is based on. What does the doctrine of stare decisis mean? Adhere to the decision and do not unsettle things which are already established. And that is what a precedent is, right? A precedent is grounding such a thing so as to bring about a uniformity in law. That is, they've mentioned over here, certainty and uniformity in law. Under the doctrine of stare decisis, or I would call precedent, you have the concept of a ratio decidendi. Okay. Now the ratio decidendi is that which could be extracted from the decision which constitutes the ratio. What do you mean by this? This is what I had told you. A ratio decidendi is arrived at after looking into all the considerations, all the material facts of the case. See over here, the material facts of the case, whereby they hear both parties, take in all evidence, make sure that the evidence is proper, and then they come to a decision which is known as your ratio decidendi. So your ratio decidendi only has the binding effect of a precedent and not the obiter dicta. What is the obiter dicta? Obiter dicta is only known as your personal opinion of the judge. So here they're saying the expression is used to specially denote those judicial utterances. That means while giving the judgment, the judge will just say it as, he just believes. He'll say something like, it is my personal opinion that so and so, or it is my personal belief that so and so. And in the course of delivering the judgment, they were not strictly necessary for the decision of the particular issue raised. So in simple words, I can say that obiter dicta only is the personal opinion of the judge, and it merely has a persuasive value, which means that which is uttered while giving the judgment need not be followed by the other courts in law. So friends, This is the end of judicial precedents. In terms of your questions that can be asked, this topic is very, very important. Okay, here there are multiple chances of different types of questions being asked. So question number 1 can simply be, what is a precedent? Okay, so when this question is asked, what is a precedent, then you must mention, what are the things that you must mention? You must mention the doctrine of stare decisis, and then you must mention the principle of ratio decidendi and obiter dicta, and then you must specify that a precedent is applicable in such a way that the decision given by the higher courts is applicable on all the lower courts. So this is one type of question that could be asked. The second question that could be asked is, what are the types of precedents? Okay, so types of precedents, you must mention the 5 types of precedents, not 4. Please be careful with that. So in the types of precedents, you must simply write the 5 types of precedents. Then they might even ask you very specifically, as a short answer, what do you mean by the doctrine of stare decisis? Or what do you mean by ratio decidendi or obiter dicta? So they might ask individual questions like this. Since this entire topic is very heavy and a scope of lot of questions to be asked comes from here, please do read the same and be well prepared when you're writing the exam.